Okay, so we are live, and I always look forward to these Chit-Chat Tuesdays. I really hope you do as well. I'd really like to introduce Amelia Cotter, who is a poet, author, storyteller, folklorist. She's written 5 books. The most recent one is Apparitions, which we'll be talking about. Another thing I wanted to go into, Amelia, which I have never mentioned because we're not strangers to doing these lives. We've done it twice before. Once was a past life regression, and the other one was like a catch up on it. But we always like to talk a little bit about your paranormal experiences. We've mentioned about your poetry, but one thing I haven't mentioned yet is the dragon goddess cosmetics that you do. So that would be really cool to go into as well. So yeah, that would definitely be good. I'm seeing a few hellos now at the moment, so I'd like to say hello to Anne and Claire. And welcome everybody that's joining, and the silent watchers as well. So it's going to be very good. So I'm looking forward. It's got 90 minutes, and usually most people start off and you go, "What's your first paranormal experience?" I'm going to work backwards this time around because I think that would be good. Because sometimes when you start at the beginning, by the time you get to the end, that you kind of run out of time, and it's hi to Patricia as well. So I thought I'd start, and please ask questions, anybody. And if there's anything in this sort of brief introduction that I've done that you'd like to add as well, I'm getting lots of people beginning to say hello now, so hello to all of you. I wanted to talk about the Apparitions book, which I think it'll be a great book for a lot of people, because there's so many people which have depression, anxiety, and I think that having something like the poetry that you've written in it would be incredibly beneficial and healing. Was it a healing journey for yourself as well?
Yeah, thank you. So this is the first interview I've done where I've given like official remarks about the book, other than like the lead up to it and everything, like talking about it for years. It took me 5 years to put the book together. It's a short chapbook. It's a 50-page read, very carefully curated. A lot of things I wrote over the years in response to my own struggles with sort of mental health and wellness and well-being, and search for happiness, and also physical health. And so my goal with the book is to, of course, share my experiences, and then also be able to reach out to people in hopes of inspiring them as well, helping other people feel seen and heard through their own experiences. And so, to touch on a little bit, specifics, I am the child of alcoholics and have had a lot of important people in my life who are alcoholics or recovering alcoholics or coping alcoholics, depending on how people like to refer to themselves, also when they have struggled with addiction. And that had a profound impact on me. I'm a cancer survivor, and I have OCD. So I have obsessive compulsive disorder, which is an interesting thing, because having OCD or talking about OCD is kind of like a cultural joke almost, where people throw that term around very easily. So like, when people are socially awkward, they don't say like, "Oh gosh, I'm so autistic," or anything like that. Whereas like if somebody has a quirk of some kind that may or may not actually be related to what OCD really is, they will say, "Gosh, I'm so OCD," or "It's just my OCD." And even I have found myself struggling with that over the years. People who struggle, I think, with mental and physical health issues, sometimes make light of their own issues in order to make other people feel comfortable. So I've found myself kind of giving into the sort of societal norms too, where I like do myself a disservice and other people a disservice by making jokes about it. Like making jokes, of course, to lighten. I think it's okay to joke about it if it's like me joking about it, but just that sort of like dismissiveness, I guess, has been damaging for me and to me. in any case, that's just kind of like a little taste of who I am and where I'm coming from. It's interesting with this collection coming in the wake of COVID and everything. A lot of people experience trauma and isolation during the pandemic. Not that the pandemic is over, but like people are kind of going back to normal right now. And so even though my poetry and experiences don't specifically relate to that, my lighting is like getting all like getting
You
like
look absolutely fine. It looks fine on my computer.
yeah. It's really sunny out, but it looks like it's like super dark in here. But anyway, so I people who have experienced trauma or isolation through COVID may also find some comfort in those words too. And I have a copy of the book, which I should have had prepared.
Yeah, please do. Yeah. So I hope everybody's okay that's watching. Here we go.
So I just to show it to you, of course it's all shiny. There we go. So that's what it looks like. It's really beautiful. My husband took the cover photo. The book is dedicated to him. And then and you can find more information about it up anywhere, that you look me up or look up the book if it's something that would be of interest or use to you in your life. So
really good. And it resonates with a lot of people. Claire here says, I have OCD. People think it's just to do with checking how many times you check the door, etc.
Right. So people think that it's like about being really neat and clean, or that you have to touch something like 30 times, or it's portrayed in pop culture in different ways, like Charlie's mom in Always Sunny in Philadelphia has to do something a million times or Charlie will die. And it's like some of those things, there are elements of that in OCD, but it's one of these like illnesses or disorders or whatever, however you see it, if you have it, that is very little understood and very easily thrown around by other people who would otherwise be sensitive to people's like disabilities. So I'm trying to find a way to advocate more for it, but I'm just now at this age and where I'm at in life becoming comfortable even just talking about having it.
Yeah, that's good that people are open more to it as well. And like you say, I think it's one of those things, like as you said, people kind of joke about it, they just kind of do something and say it's OCD. So I think for a lot of people, this and myself, it's a good reminder. I must say, there's lots of people saying hello, but I must say hello to Lindsay, who I've just popped at the moment. She's with with John, the people that do and run Exploring the Afterlife. So I just want to say hello to you right now. What I like about the book, so I'll also mention a bit more, it's got some really nice micro poetry in it. And what I also think is wonderful is your launch party is going to be at Cuddle Bunnies, which I had to look on YouTube what Cuddle Bunnies is, and it looks amazing. So can you say a little bit like why you chose Cuddle Bunnies?
Sure. So I'm a poet at heart, and I've been writing poetry for a long time and writing on more serious topics, but I'm not the kind of person who like goes to like poetry slams and open mics, and you meet some really interesting, as you do in the paranormal world too, you meet some really interesting people. Some are, let's be honest, like some are have more personality than others. And I think that's true in the poetry world too. And people know that I write poetry, but they're not but I don't have like an audience of like poetry people necessarily. There's a strong poetry community in Chicago, but I guess I wanted people to feel comfortable coming to the event and feel like, oh, come listen to me talk about, that time I had that suicidal depression. Doesn't sound like a fun thing to do on a Sunday night, even for people who love me and support me and want me to sell 1 million copies of the book. So I was like, where can we do it that will be inviting to people and also inspiring of like care and comfort, which would be a place where you could have an interaction with animals. So Cuddle Bunny is right around the corner from where I live. And it's like, it's not like a cat cafe, because I know a lot of people know what those are. It's like a place where you can go and you can pet rabbits and you can have special events there where rabbits are present. There's like some rabbit yoga, or you can do paint a bunny, sketch a bun, I think they call it. You can have poetry readings there, which is how I contacted them and was like, let me do an opening. They did an art show opening there too. So they were like, oh, that sounds great. You're due a book launch. That's good publicity for everybody. So but you can go there like any day of the week, reserve a time, and they'll take you into a room where you just sit down and they give you little tiny like pieces of cilantro, and you feed the rabbits, you pet the rabbits, you rotate through, and they rescue bunnies. They foster bunnies, they board bunnies for people who are like bunny pet owners. I'm a big animal lover of all animals, and I used to be deathly allergic to rabbits when I was a kid. Like deathly allergic. So I'm excited now that I can be around them. So yeah, so there'll be bunnies, there'll be cupcakes, there will be some champagne, there will be non-alcoholic beverages. It'll be cute, and some other poets will do some readings, and we'll keep it cool.
That sounds really good. And we've had from Anna here the book you showed us. What is it? So it's a poetry book. Yeah. I best leave Amelia.
No, it is a book of poetry, and so it's poetry that's not related to the paranormal specifically, even though it's called Apparitions and it sort of fits into my brand. But it relates to these issues of anxiety and isolation and trauma and things like that. But it pulls in supernatural elements and some other elements, celestial elements and things like that. So it's a book of poetry, and you can get it on Amazon. And I think that all of my books are available through Amazon UK also. If not now, like they will be at some point. Like sometimes it takes a while for them to like populate other regions, but people can also order the book directly from my online store. And there's a shipping cost. There's a cost for shipping in the States. If somebody wanted to order the copy from me signed or something like that, we could talk about like what the cost would be to send it overseas and then work out something from there. So
perfect. And if anybody does want to get a signed copy from you, I usually ask it towards the end, but I think it's an ideal time to ask it now, and I don't see why there's any way to mention it throughout. But your website and how people can get in contact with you through like your web address, so might as well do that now if anybody wants to say I'd really like a signed copy of that book or one of your other books.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, you can go to ameliacotter.com. And you can access my store through there, and I'm easy to reach. So you can Google me also, and there's a lot of information about how to get a hold of me.
So yeah, I mean, there's so many things to talk about, and if you have any questions about this book, then please say. I mean, it doesn't have to be done in a linear process. If we jiggle things up a bit, makes it more fun, definitely. But you've just recently, I think if it's been a bit longer, do let me know. But celebrate your first birthday of the dragon goddess. It's like a boutique. That's it. Yes, absolutely. So if you can say how that started, and your husband, he puts a lot of. He's the alchemist for a lot of it as well, I do believe. So if you can explain how that all started.
So my husband, for a long time, he was making his own incense, and he wanted to make it a little bit more official. He made incense when he was a kid. So his mom and his stepdad were magical practitioners. So he grew up in a magical household where, people would come over to the house, in robes and stuff like that. And he would like roll handmade incense and things like that. And so as an adult, he's kind of gotten back into his interest in some of these, I guess, like esoterica and things like that, like occult studies. And he loves making incense. He loves like collecting oils and all this kind of stuff. And I do a lot of events where I go and I give a presentation about the supernatural or something, and then I sell, my books at a table. And I was like, it would be cool if we could make it more official. We saw this really cool I'm going to end up giving a plug for somebody else's business, but we went to this one conference where there was a team of ladies there who had this business. I think it was called Baphomet or Baphomet, depending on how you pronounce it. And it was like the Baphomet like insignia, but with like bath bombs and like perfumes and all this kind of fun, like girly stuff. And so we bought some of it and we're like, oh, that's really neat. Like, so maybe one day we'll do something like that. So right now, during the pandemic, we had some extra time on our hands because I lost my job. And I was like, why don't we do it now? Like, let's put something together. So we put together a fun little brand. I love dragons. So the dragon thing was my idea. And he had his whole process. He made 2 incenses. We have 2 solid perfumes. And then we have dragon meditation bundles, which are not, everything else is handmade. That's not handmade. That's like prefab, something that we put together, but they are great. People love them. They come with little dragon figurines. And you can access all that through ameliacotter.com as well. And then the site is ameliacotter.square.site, I think, because we didn't want to pay for like the full blown thing yet. Like, it's not like, we're not Elon Musk out here. It's just like a cute little, like, we sell some incense kind of on the side. So we still just have it all. Like, if you go to that website, it's got my books and the incense and all the fun stuff that we do through the Dragon Goddess Boutique. And everything smells wonderful. He makes everything like at home in the kitchen. It's very cool stuff. And it's all sourced like responsibly. So sustainable and organic are words that like consumers have to watch out for. And he and I both learned a lot about this during the process. Like, when you do go to these hippy dippy places and you want to buy your incense or your Palo Santo, like a lot of that stuff is like extremely endangered. Mm-hmm. And like, you think you're supporting something good because it's all like, it's witchy and fun and, and happy and about wellness, like self-care, like the $1 billion like self-care industry is like booming right now. And so is like Wiccan and these other things that everybody who grew up reading Harry Potter now is like into like Wiccan. So, but you have to be really careful because the words sustainable and all of that sometimes are just business words. And so we have spent extra money making sure that we were sourcing from places that weren't, as far as we understand, going directly out and harming like native populations of stuff that's really endangered. So anyway, long story long, but it's been a really fun process. And so now we have this big spread. Whenever I go do an event, we have all this awesome stuff. We sell it online. And it's just been a lot of fun. It's been very like therapeutic and just wonderful for Jonathan. He's always thinking of like the next thing that he wants to make, what would be fun to make, what would be fun to sell. We want to do some like room and like personal body sprays. A lot of it is like more than one use, like the solid perfume people use as like a lip balm too and other things. So
yeah, it sounds, and I think as well, if you either buy that yourself or receive it as a gift, it's much nicer receiving something which is more unique. It's been handmade rather than something you could go to any store and get hold of. So I'm sure that's going to be. I've got to say a few more highs out. I think I've missed some people because quite a load of people have come on. So I do apologise for those I'm going to miss. But Annie, Claire, Gillian, Leah, Patricia, and Gregory, thank you for joining in right now. And we're doing this and we're kind of moving sort of backwards. So the next book, and if I kind of missed anything out, which was before Apparitions, was Where the Party Never Ended, about the Baraboo. I wasn't sure I got it right. The Baraboo Inn.
Yeah, the old Baraboo Inn.
Yes.
But don't worry because everybody says it a different way. Even people from Baraboo are like, the Baraboo Inn. The Baraboo Old Inn. The old Baraboo Inn. But yes.
Yeah.
So I have a knack for choosing like the longest, most convoluted titles that have like 10 words in them. But yeah, the book is called Where the Party Never Ended, Ghosts of the Old Baraboo Inn. And it's about the old Baraboo Inn in Baraboo, Wisconsin, which is just, the town of Baraboo is just one of the neatest small towns that I've ever come across. It was home to the Ringling Brothers and Barnum Bailey Circus. There's all these incredible old photos of, elephants marching through town and things like that. It was also famous for a lot of different things. It's also where like the boilerplate was invented, like for modern newspapers. Just a really interesting place. The International Crane Foundation is there. So there's a foundation that houses all 15 of the world's crane species. And it's home to Man Mound, which is the last anthropomorphic effigy mound left in North America. Now, Wisconsin, the state of Wisconsin has more Native American mounds that than any other state, and more, even though many of them have been destroyed or plowed over. I believe that it has the most that are still standing or existing in some form or other. And so Wisconsin, it doesn't always, if you follow American news, Wisconsin doesn't always have a great rep in our national news, but it's a really cool state. And I love Baraboo, and it's about 3-hour drive from Chicago. So anyway, the old Baraboo Inn is one of the most haunted places that I've ever been to. And it's cool. It's a cool haunting. It's a cool vibe. It's like a fun, interactive haunting where where the spirits are friendly and they're playful and they're inquisitive. And it's dubious. There's some dubious history as to whether or not like dark things happen there. And there's a lot of stories there that sound like the typical sort of urban legendy kind of like terrible things that happen in the basement and, during Prohibition and things like that. And I mean, for a building that's been around, it's been around, 150 years, not too terribly long, but long enough for like certainly a lot of weird things to happen if it has been a saloon the entire time. But in general, like it's a very, some of the coolest ghost photos also that I've ever seen have been produced there. Cause like, I'm pretty hard to impress too. Like when it comes to like ghost photos, somebody's always like, I got the coolest photo. You can't, oh my God, wait till you see it. And it's like a little orb with like a smiley face in it or something. And you're like, wow, that's really incredible. But like some of the most like chilling and creepy ghost photography that I've ever seen, in addition to like these hauntings that are really neat. And so I love it there. I love it so much I wrote a whole book about it. So.
Yeah, fantastic. So can you explain like one of the photographs that really impressed you, which I'm sure is more than like if you squint your eyes you can see a face, on this wall. So what were some of the
right? And I think you might be able to find this photo on the internet, and probably at like their Facebook page or somewhere. I know that it's not like and it's in the book, so it's not a secret photo. There's this one photo that is so creepy. It's a picture of what's her name? I think they call her Sybil. And it's basically like you see a woman whose back is turned to you, sort of hunched over with like long hair, maybe blonde, like light hair. And she's wearing this long dress that looks like it could be like a pajama gown even. And it's like kind of like a light pink. And she looks like she's hunched over, like either she's old or she's like ducking down, or, and you're not really sure. And except that she's floating about a foot above the bar. And it's just, I remember the first time I saw it, it gave me chills. It's so clearly, it leaves very little to the imagination. So if you are going to believe that it's a ghost, it's much easier to believe that that's a ghost than the shape of the leaves in a tree that look like a face or something like that. So, and then there's another one, taken into a mirror. Photos taken into a mirror should absolutely be taken with a grain of salt, but you can see that there's regular people reflected in the mirror, and then you can see these like really weird, like grisly looking faces. And again, they're not grisly faces that are like teeny tiny or anything. They're like human sized faces and heads that are sort of like over top of the other people, that are taking the photo, taking like a selfie of themselves in the photo or whatever, into the mirror. So just really interesting stuff. And there's another one. There's like a shadow figure taken by the bathroom of like a man wearing like a top hat or something, you know, like an old fashioned hat, like an old cowboy hat. There were a lot of cowboy fashions in Wisconsin, even though you don't think about Wisconsin being like a cowboy kind of state. And then they try to recreate them. So they'll show you the photo that they took of a person or a real person's shadow and compare it to the shadow that appeared there. So I appreciate too when people do that. But just really cool. And when you go there, when you walk through the door, it's like, wow, it really hits you. But it's not negative. It's not scary. And just a really cool place.
Brilliant. Now, I don't know if this is a conversation going between people in the chat, but I just got up and wondered if you had any stories, because there's actually there's like a whole documentaries and seen it lots on television. But Patricia asked, where is Skinwalker Ranch? And I'm trying to actually remember where it is.
It's in Utah. It's in Utah. Oh my God. So we just finished watching the Skinwalker Ranch TV show with, what's his name? Taylor from Ancient Aliens.
Yeah, I can see his face.
Yeah. So, and then I kind of went down the Skinwalker Ranch rabbit hole because there's a really great episode of the podcast Astonishing Legends about Skinwalker Ranch. It might be several parts actually. But yeah, there's a lot of cool, interesting information out there. I don't really know what to make of it, but the stories about that place are really neat. But it's in Utah.
Brilliant. Before we go backwards on things, before we get to Breakfast with Bigfoot, I think I might got this mixed up. I might be getting the timeline slightly wrong, but I think after you wrote the Breakfast with Bigfoot, I think you moved to Chicago, and I heard on one of the podcasts by somebody one of the most creepiest stories I've heard, and I would call it the Matrix Men. Some people that you saw dark shades and you were talking to them, and they you can say that, because I know the audience would love that.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I was just thinking about that story the other day. That's funny. That's tied in with the Skinwalker Ranch thing a little bit, because it calls into question like those stories when people have like weird encounters with like people that don't seem like quite like they know how to be human, or like people who have like lost time stories, or people that like ran out of gas, so they pull into a gas station and it's, thank goodness this gas station's there, and then they drive by the next day and the gas station isn't there and never was, and so where did they get gas from, or some other creepy thing. But anyway, I have a couple of weird stories where it's sort of like maybe I just met some strange people, or maybe it was supernatural, right? That's the fun. But yeah, so I encountered these guys on a hot summer day in like the middle of July who were dressed up like Matrix characters, like all black dusters, but they weren't goths. Okay. I was a goth in high school. Their clothes were sort of like weirdly, I don't know how to describe it. The clothes were kind of like grayed, as if they had like found them in like an alley and were like, let's put these on. Like in a movie when you see the guy like beat up the security guard and then he comes out and he's like wearing the security guard uniform. It looked like they had these were two guys that reminded me, again, I lived in Edgewater near Andersonville, Chicago. So it's like a big gay neighborhood. And they reminded me of like two hip kind of gay guys, like out on the town on this beautiful day going to the beach kind of thing, right? The lake is right there. But they were dressed in these like weird clothes, and they're sort of like, walking along. Like, it was so weird. It's everybody was picnicking and hanging out, and nobody stared at them. Nobody looked at them. Nobody paid any attention. And I was walking right towards them with my dog, and they like stopped me on the path. which is also kind of weird. I had just moved to Chicago, and to me, like, urban people like aren't friendly, right? Like, I'm from a little suburb in Maryland, so I don't expect to have friendly conversations around town with people. And like, yes, Chicago is a friendlier city than maybe like New York or Boston, but it's still not really that, it's not that big of a difference. So anyway, it was weird that they stopped me and were like, "How are you?" I don't remember all the details of the conversation. I only remember how they looked and how they seemed really amused by this conversation that they were having with me, which was very brief. Just asking me a question about my day or something weird, and like, and I was just like being polite. Uh, everything's good. And I remember when they laughed. They laughed unusually hard at something I said that really wasn't that funny. And they had these big gaping black mouths. And I should say they were also wearing sunglasses. They were bald. They were really pale. It was a bright July day. And I promise you they weren't goths. You know, everybody's like, they were just like, you're being too hard on these. I'm like, no, trust me, they weren't. But pale sunglasses, and they had these gaping black mouths with like dark brown teeth, like you would see in a movie, again, if somebody was trying to exaggerate bad teeth. It reminded me, if people have seen the movie It, like the original TV movie, when the woman goes into the old woman's house. It used to be her house when she was a kid, and she sits down for tea with this woman and realizes that she's like the clown after she starts laughing, and she has these big brown teeth. So I don't know if people will get that reference, but that's what it reminded me of.
Yeah.
And it was like, it was just so bizarre. And I remember walking away from that situation thinking, and I wouldn't normally think that I'd just be like, oh, city living, right? And thinking like, was that real? Like, were those people real? Did that happen? Nobody looked, nobody saw. Like, it was so bizarre. It was completely bizarre.
No, absolutely. And yeah, Patricia says, do not like the sound of
No.
those people. I'll go into Breakfast of Bigfoot shortly, but I must remind you the place you were staying at, but where you heard like a child cartoony type voice, and to begin with, you thought it was somebody else. So if you
Oh
could
man,
go
Paul, you
into
really do your research. Like, you really remember all the good stories. I was just thinking about this. So this happened in Galena.
that.
And we're going there in 2 weeks. We're going to be staying at the DeSoto Hotel in Galena, Illinois, which is a lovely, beautiful place. And that's where this thing happened. So I do want to say that even though I write my whole life is like paranormal stuff, that's like there's a professional boundary for me where like I don't spend all of my time thinking or talking about ghosts, and I don't
Yes.
expect everything to be haunted everywhere I go. So when
Yeah.
haunted weird stuff does happen to me, I get kind of surprised. I'm just like, I don't know. People probably know what I mean, because I do know people who like live and breathe the paranormal day and night. But for me, it's kind of like, ooh, we're staying at a haunted hotel, like, ooh, spooky. And then I can't sleep because I am a sissy. But anyway, we had no issues whatsoever in the hotel room all night. We stayed there for 2 nights. Gorgeous. And I just got up to pee at like 4 a.m. And after I didn't have any, and there were no vibes. There was no vibe. It wasn't cold. I didn't have an eerie feeling. I just did what I did, and I went to get back in bed. And this voice came from the direction of where my husband was sleeping, and it said, hello. And like, sometimes Jonathan and I talk to each other in weird voices. I think this is like a married people thing. Like, we talk in goofy voices to each other. And so I said back, hello, in this little sing-song voice. And then I got in the bed, and I was like, and I looked at Jonathan, and he's sleeping. He's a stomach sleeper. He's sleeping like this with his face down in the pillow. And he's like, and he sleeps like a rock. He does not wake up at like 4 a.m. and it's like chipper and, cogent. So he like sleeps like a rock. And I'm like looking at him. I'm like, there's no way that he was awake 2 seconds ago. And there's no way that he said this. And then I realized like that voice didn't even come from him. It came from like the corner of the room. And I got a chill. And then, but it was kind of funny because it was a funny voice and I didn't feel threatened. I felt like there was somebody in the room, but they didn't want to scare me. So they mimicked something that I wouldn't think was scary, something that I would think was funny or cute. And so then I just sort of laid down. And then of course, like with the covers, just kind of like that. And nothing else happened. That was it. But when we got home from the trip, so nothing else happened at the hotel. But when we came back from the trip for a couple of nights, and Jonathan witnessed this too, and he's into the occult studies thing from more like an academic perspective and like bettering oneself, like bettering one's higher self kind of perspective. But he's not into like a ghosts and demons and spooky stuff kind of, he's not into that. But he witnessed this too, where for a couple nights we could hear our dog walking around the apartment. He's got these nails that are like clickety clickety, everywhere on this, like on the like laminate floors. And we could hear it plain as day. Oscar like walking around, just pacing the apartment, which he'll do sometimes. He'll get up in the middle of the night. He'll get a drink of water. He'll walk to the door, whatever. He's an old dog. So he has these weird like night routines, except that Oscar was sleeping with us in the bed. And we can hear it like just even like the depth of it, like hearing it like walk around the bed. And, even if you'd sit up, you can't see anything. And it was jarring, but it wasn't really scary. It was more like, okay, I get it. Go home, go back to Galena, whatever you are. I acknowledge you. Thank you for visiting. It's time to go. So it was so mundane, like the sound of it, that it wasn't terrifying. But it was weird. Like thinking back on it, it was weird. And it went away after a couple of days. And it's like, I don't know really what anybody would have wanted with us, where they felt like it was necessary to do that, to manifest in that way, I guess. But it was really interesting. So we'll see if it happens again.
Absolutely. And if you hear the voice again saying hello, will you say hello back in a fun way or?
I guess I should, right? Yeah. I'm not one, it would be rude of me not to reciprocate. So
yeah.
I'll probably, but if it does happen again, I think this time I'll be a lot more spooked.
So we had Gregory's, a few people popped up as well. And we've already said where you can get your books from. Amazon and also Amelia Cotter's website. But what I will do for you, Amelia, is I will post links on the YouTube video, and also ask Lindsay and John if they can post the links so people can get hold of your books and
thank you.
That as well. Sure. Now we had Claire asked, I love to do haunted investigations in the US. So if you were to do like a spooky ghost tour of the US, where would you recommend? And you also saw quite a few haunted locations when you were a member in the RIP files as well. So you've been to quite a few haunted locations. So which ones would you say that would be good to go to if you were doing a spooky tour of the US?
So I think that, so Gettysburg, Pennsylvania is a great place to go. A lot of places in New England. Basically just, if you stay on the East Coast, especially in New England or the South, like Savannah and St. Augustine, Florida, I think is the oldest city settlement like in the US that was settled by Europeans. You get more history packed into a smaller space. There's like a high concentration of haunted places. There's a lot of Civil War sites in the mid-Atlantic, around Gettysburg. Antietam battlefield that are quite haunted, and also quite beautiful. New Orleans is one of my favorite like haunted places, and that's also just like a great tourist destination. And I would love to go there again and again. I'm waiting for somebody to invite me to a conference in New Orleans. And Chicago. So the Midwest has some great spots. The Midwest has a lot of like the big ticket sort of insane asylums and mental in hospitals and institutions and things like that. The Villisca Axe Murder House is in Iowa, and that's one that people are always asking about, even like Americans that are like, oh, there's that place in the Midwest. What's it called? Where the Axe people. And I was like, oh, yeah, Villisca. And then I haven't been that far out west to do any investigating, but there's all sorts of cool old mining towns and stuff. Somebody asked me recently, like what's on my, on my bucket list, like where I would go next if I could. And then I always have an answer and then I draw a blank, like when it actually comes time to answering it. But I think like the Stanley Hotel is on my list of places to go, in Colorado. And I really am excited to do some cave exploring, not caving, but just exploring around like Kentucky. Even before Hellier became like a popular craze, I was interested in some of the older lore, like the Appalachian Mountains are the oldest mountains on Earth. And there's so much like folklore and ghost lore and creature lore surrounding them. So I don't see myself like going spelunking or anything like that, but I'd love to explore some of the haunted like cave areas around there too.
Yeah, that'd be really cool to do that. I love a good cave as well. Again, just to be in there, not really sort of what we call potholing or anything like that.
Yeah, right. I'm not going to be crawling through something called the birth canal, but but I'll walk in, I'll walk in like 30 feet, if I can stand up. So
yeah, absolutely. I'm exactly the same. Patricia, probably one of the most famous venues that we know of here in the UK is Bobby Mackeys. Have you been there, or do you know of anybody who's investigated Bobby Mackeys?
Okay, so Bobby Mackeys, which is in Kentucky, right? I think it's in Kentucky. Yes. And the Myrtles Plantation down outside of New Orleans are two places that have always been on my bucket list. And in recent years, people have started to circulate these dreadful rumors about how maybe they're not as haunted as people say they are, or that they're overrated or something like that. I think with the Myrtles, I think that there is the suggestion that there's a lot of the ghost stories were fabricated there. And I've learned over the years that can be true, that people get ghost stories confused with ghost experiences, but Bobby Mackeys, I would love to go to. Sometimes I think it's not fair when people say like, oh, I went there and nothing happened, so I don't think it's that haunted, because that's just not how ghosts work. Like they're not like circus performers. So I would still love to just walk in the door, even just to have like a drink there, whatever it is now. A lot of places in the US now that ghost hunting is this huge cultural phenomenon. Like places that aren't open anymore are open to like exclusively to paranormal investigations, or they're like Halloween haunted houses. So that's kind of an interesting conversation too, like ethically, if that's a good thing or not. But that's like a topic for like a whole other day. But yes, I'd love to do Bobby Mackeys, and no, I've never been there.
And Claire says, what's your thoughts on Ameliaville?
Oh, Ameliaville. Boy, so that's another place that's steeped in. So as a researcher, there's three distinct areas in my viewpoint about a haunted place, or a place that's known to be haunted. There's the history, the actual history of the place that is known. There's the stories about the place. There's the folklore, or even like the untrue history, right? The stories that like so-and-so got, the whole family got killed here, which in Ameliaville's case is actually true. But there's the stories about a place, and then there's people's actual ghost experiences. So my understanding of Ameliaville is that the history is real. Obviously, we know that an entire family did get killed there. The stories the stories are real, right? The stories exist. We've all read the book. We've all seen the movie. We know, like, I've met the Cortino brothers, that they don't go by Lutz anymore. They didn't, I don't think they had a good relationship with their stepdad. I've met them and seen that their lives have been deeply, deeply impacted by whatever did happen. But to my knowledge and understanding, like, the actual ghostly or paranormal experiences that occurred there are maybe not as they have been portrayed, and that people who have been there since or lived there or been in the house have not experienced things to the degree, maybe, let's say, that there were claims about. I have my own skeptical feelings about certain parts of the story. But I also think it's important, we were talking earlier about, like, mental health and the sort of the way the world is, that I feel like it's important to validate people's experiences. Exactly. And not to disbelieve things, to sort of err on the side of caution. It just, because it's that way in regular life. If somebody came to me and told me that something terrible happened to them, it would be awful of me to disbelieve them. So I sort of see paranormal stories that way as well. I've had people come up to me over the years and tell me stories that I flat out know aren't true, things that are not physically possible, even in the realm of, like, paranormal happenings. But it's not for me to, like, debase their experience or their understanding of their experience, I guess. So yeah. I don't know. That's kind of not even really, that's sort of like a roundabout answer for the question, because I don't really know, but I am skeptical, and I am skeptical of the Warrens. And I know that, like, that's not a cool viewpoint to always have in this field, because they're very beloved. But I just get some weird vibes, I think. And in general, fear mongering through the suggestion that we're all could be under attack by demons at any time is, like, a dangerous way of interpreting paranormal activity or encouraging people to live. So I'll stop there before I get myself in trouble. But
no, it's fine. So because we're going through the books, and I just want to make sure I get all of them in beforehand. So Breakfast with Bigfoot, a children's book, loosely based off a real, acclaimed story. If you say a little bit about that, that would be really cool. Yeah,
so on to other serious topics. My children's book, Breakfast with Bigfoot, for 3 to 6 year olds. But so that was the first book that I wrote, that I completed, I should say, because I wanted to get into children's publishing and go in a whole other direction. I didn't think I was going to do, like, paranormal, ghost huntery types of things. I just thought I was going to work in the publishing industry, like writing kids' books or something. So anyway, it just a weird kind of turn of events that took. But it's based on the Albert Osman story from 1924. This happened in British Columbia, where this guy claimed that he had been abducted by a family of big feet in the woods, and that they had kind of looked after him, tried to feed him, but he couldn't eat what they were eating. They lived in a big nest. There was, like, a mom and a pop and a baby, boy and girl, and, like, a grandma Bigfoot. And he had all this very detailed information about them. And it was this very unbelievable story that he had nothing to gain from telling, because this was decades before the Bigfoot craze hit North America in the 60s, with the Bigfoot footage and the footprints and all that kind of stuff. When it really came into focus in pop culture, he really had nothing to gain financially or fame wise from telling this insane story that he, and then they let him go. They were like, they kept trying to keep him but it felt, and this is me, like, super paraphrasing, that they were concerned about him, right? Like, this hairless being that looks like us is lost in the woods. Like, how can we help him? And so I always thought that story was when I was younger. And like, again, before I was into the paranormal in this sort of like weird professional capacity, I just got a kick out of the story. And I was like, this would make a great children's story. So I changed Albert Osman into a 6-year-old girl. And, you know, she hikes in the woods. She gets lost. Bigfoot rescues her. They compare notes on things that Bigfoot eats in the wild and things that little children would eat if they had their lunch packed for them by their parents. And it's kind of about like things to do if you get lost in the woods and what to eat and what not to eat.
Yeah, I think there's something about goldfish crackers or goldfish sandwiches
Yeah.
or something like that in there.
Yeah, like Bigfoot slurps a big raw fish, and Gretchen, our protagonist, she has goldfish crackers that her mom packed. He wants to eat acorns, but she's got a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, you know. So the funny thing was, I listened again. Astonishing Legends is one of my favorite podcasts, and they have like a 4-parter on Bigfoot. And one of the guys, I think Bob Gimlin from like the famous Patterson Gimlin footage, talked about how Bigfoot loves peanut butter sandwiches or something crazy. And I remembered like hearing this casually, listening to this podcast like a year or two ago, and like spitting my coffee out all over the room because I was like, I wrote a book about this. Like, this is like, you know, it was obviously a joke for me, like just a cute little thing about peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. And I was like, wow, this is like, you know, as if I had done real research on what Bigfoot apparently likes to eat. So
Yeah.
I don't know if Bigfoot is real. I certainly hope so, because I think it would make the world a cooler place.
Yeah, I'd like to think so as
Yeah.
well. So going back to your second book, and I'm hoping I get the timeline right, Maryland Ghosts, that book and how that one came about and what people will come across when they read about obviously Ghosts in Maryland, but there's some of the cool stories that are in that as well,
Yeah.
please.
So I always tell people you don't have to be from Maryland or even know anything about Maryland to enjoy these stories, because some of the stories do take place in like famous landmarks or Civil War sites and historic places that could be of interest too if history is also something that you know, grabs you. But it's just a lot of really crazy stories. People sent me their UFO encounters. 'Cause there's a lot of places around Maryland, not just around DC, but in Maryland, where there are different army bases where there are these like strange sightings of creatures or UFOs and things like that that have happened over the years. I got just kind of, boy, I got hit with everything. I'm from people in my family. One of the cool things about the book was that I collected all the stories of my aging family members who had cool ghost stories to tell. So they're kind of like all in one place. And then I interviewed ghost hunters and just regular folks I went to college with who were like, oh, yeah, I have a ghost story. And so I am, I think I love all of my books, but I think that one's the most fun one for me to think about. Writing it was a lot of fun, and I was really proud of, you know, the work that went into that. Just kind of collecting. I think there's 35 stories, and I didn't hit every county or anything like that, or certainly every cool place that there is to see. But it's a really neat book.
Brilliant, brilliant. And I did miss a question here. What's your thoughts on divic boxes? Patricia wants to know. You can get lots from eBay.
I don't know that much about divic boxes. I know that divics are like come from like Jewish lore and mythology, and I think sometimes, you know, a lot of the, sorry for my academic responses, but like so
No.
much of how we interpret in the, I mean, I could speak for like American culture, I guess, but like our westernized sort of Anglo-Saxon view of things is very Christianized too. And so we tend to like fetishize other non-Christian, like religious, you know, we see everything in black and white with like angels and demons, and we don't really understand like, you know, what dibics are or what jinns are, or, you know, Native American folklore that gets bastardized in all sorts of different ways because we interpret everything through like a certain lens. So my understanding is that dibic boxes are like boxes that these demons are trapped in or something like that. I don't know that much about them. I try to steer away from stuff that I don't that I don't understand. I try to steer away from giving, like, having opinions on stuff I don't understand if it sounds too weird to be true, kind of. But my only token there too is that there's a famous divic story in Chicago, from not not the South Side, by historic standards, but I think on like the near South Side by today's standards, there's a famous like urban legend about a divic, the divic of, I'm drawing a blank, the divic of something street. If you look it up, if you Google it and you're like Chicago, the divic of blank street, I bet it'll populate automatically. But there's an interesting story about that from Chicago. So that's all I know.
Yeah, and also as well, I think it's become quite a big thing, and I know you can buy loads of them on eBay. And I mean, I
Oh,
think some
right.
of them
People
are
are like
real.
selling them, right?
Yeah, they're selling them, and then you get people doing the Divic box openings on a lot of paranormal channels and things like that. So I think a lot of them are bought, and people just say, I'm going to get a load of stuff from the second-hand store and burn it up a bit and make it look a bit creepy, and
Oh my
then
God. Yeah.
make a bit of profit out of this.
I saw somebody unboxing a fart the other day, on like a TikTok. So I feel that's where we're at in society right now. And like I think I certainly pray for both the people and the demons that are apparently being stuffed against their will into all of these boxes, if in fact people are receiving demons through their eBay purchases.
Yeah. And I actually heard you talk about, which I found quite surprising, that there are people who actually believe the Blair Witch Project is true and a
Yes.
documentary.
Oh man. So that took place in Maryland. And of course, when I saw it, I think I was 13 when it came out. The debate raged furiously. For years, the debate went on among Marylanders as to whether or not this legend was real. And people started to swear. There's a term for it, I forget, but when you remember something that didn't happen,
Yes.
people were like, no, we grew up talking about the Blair Witch. Like, I remember the stories about the Blair Witch, but it's completely fabricated for the movie. And if you would go to Burkittsville, so Burkittsville was close to where I used to go to school. I worked in Sharpsburg on the Antietam battlefield for a while, and Burkittsville was on the way. And Burkittsville is a very cool, tiny little creepy town. I think it's in the movie. And people were sitting on their porches selling those they were like homemade, making those little Blair Witch dolls to sell for like years. They're like, oh yeah, why not? Let's make some money off of this. But the house that was in the Blair Witch Project was located, I'm not sure if it's still there, was in Patapsco State Park, which is much further south in the state. And my parents took me there. It was next to an old missile silo at like an abandoned like military facility, and you could access it on this trail. And my parents took me there. I had a really strange childhood, but my parents were like, "Oh yeah, let's go see the Blair Witch house." And you could still see like where they put the handprints on the wall and everything. It was just this abandoned house that they chose to feature in the movie, and it was really, really cool. But as much as I want the Blair Witch story to be real, because it was such a great cohesive piece of folklore too, it's not.
So folklore, which may be true because you're a folklorist. What's some of your favourite folklore stories and tales?
Oh my gosh, that's a really good question. I love covered bridges and covered bridge stories. Probably almost every covered bridge across the U.S. has a story about like a despondent mother throwing her crying baby off the side of the bridge, and then you can hear the baby crying. And I've been to covered bridges where, at night when I was younger and was willing to trespass, where you could hear the sound of what sounded like a baby crying. And I never believed that it was real, because again, most of these stories they're a dime a dozen, right? Every covered bridge has these same stories, and it's very unlikely that any of this ever happened. But something about the physical construct of the bridge over the water at night, you can hear a sound that sounds like a baby crying, and I'm like, that's so cool. That's so interesting.
Yeah.
And also the way that like a lot of these urban legends sort of speak to people's fears in different time periods. So a young woman who didn't want to get pregnant or was forced to have a child or something like that was probably a huge fear for young women growing up in other eras. Having a child out of wedlock, being sent away. People in our parents' generation were sometimes shunned or sent away, or if they became pregnant out of wedlock or something like that. So, stories that touch on things that are real fears that people have are interesting to me. And then here in Chicago, we have Resurrection Mary, who's the legend, like the vanishing hitchhiker legend, which you can find all over the world, everywhere, almost everywhere, even before like automobiles were real. Were invented. There were vanishing hitchhiker legends along old roadways. But here in Chicago, we have this legend where a lot of credible people have, including police officers and truck drivers and cab drivers and people just out driving along Archer Avenue at night have encountered this spirit. And so I know we're almost at time, but I do have one cool story.
Yeah, no,
If
please,
I have
yeah.
time, if I have 2
Yeah,
minutes.
yeah. Well, yeah. No, absolutely. And if it's fine, we usually finish about 10 o'clock, so that's 30 minutes. If
Oh,
you've got the time
perfect.
for that 30
Okay,
minutes.
yeah. So this doesn't have to do with Resurrection Mary, but it reminded me of that. My parents had a neighbor he's since passed on. His name was Jim Parks. He was this really cool guy who his career, he worked with adults with different types of developmental disabilities. He had a master's degree, I think, in special education, and he was from West Virginia, and like deep in the heart of West Virginia. And he had grown up there as like a closeted gay man. He had been married. He had kids before he finally, his family disowned him and everything. I mean, he had this very interesting life. When he was doing his master's or his undergrad research on something, he was studying mental health and among like I'm going to use the scientific term, like backwoods Appalachian populations. And there was a local urban legend close to where he grew up about a girl that you would see on the side of the road on this like desolate like mountainside. She would be wandering along wearing like a tattered dress, carrying like a baby doll or something in her arms. And he and his friends, and he's not alive to tell this story because I wish I could get him like on tape. He and his friends went for fun to this top of this mountain one time to see if they could see this girl, like this spirit girl, in dragging or carrying this baby along the side of the road. And they saw her. They saw this girl, and they stopped the car, and she wasn't a ghost. She was a real person. And he and obviously other people who intervened on behalf of this child, ended up discovering that this was a real living person who lived nearby in like an extremely dilapidated home. And she was a victim of incest. And the baby doll that she was supposed to be carrying around was her real baby. And she was only like 12 years old. And this baby was a product of incest as well. And he ended up doing this whole entire study and research project, and of course like trying to get her and her family and everybody in the situation help. And he told me this story, I think when I was in college, and it blew my mind. Like it blew my mind that this urban legend turned out to be real. And I think about that sometimes, like people that you see on the side of the road at night. Now it's more like, now we could just film it, right? And somebody will come help. But like, we were growing up and we didn't have camera phones, and we were more isolated and a little bit more like, not knowing what to do. Like, just, I don't know. How many times have we also interpreted something that we thought was an urban legend that turned out to be like a person who maybe needed help.
Yes.
So anyway, that story to me is endlessly fascinating, and I wish again that that he was around to retell it.
Yeah, absolutely. It'd be great if anybody did have a recording of him, if
I know.
possible. That'd be really absolutely amazing. So we're going to go. So we've got about 25 minutes left. I want to go to your first book, This House, which is kind of based off your experience. Now, I know you told me about Walter on my channel. Are you all right to run through the process again? Because every single time you do an interview, you always talk about Walter. Are
Yeah,
you all right
this
to
is
run
like,
through it again?
I mean, that's fine. So, yeah, this is like the story that I tell over and over again. I've told hundreds of times, but yeah, so the thing that got it all kicked off for me as a kiddo was this house that was close to where my dad worked. My dad worked in Moncton, Maryland, out in horse country at this place called Manor Tavern, which was a 300-year-old. It had been a stable and a barn and a residence at some point and a saloon. And then it was like a fine dining restaurant in this horse country in Maryland, is like a place where rich people ride their horses out in the countryside. The house that there was this abandoned house across from the restaurant, like literally across from the parking lot. If you sat out on the porch and like sipping your cocktails, you could see this creepy house like looking at you. And there was a house in between that was occupied at the time that is now abandoned, because I went back there in 2020 before the pandemic shut everything down. That house, Walter's house, is gone. And in place of it, where the grounds used to be, there's now an equine, I guess, or equestrian veterinary hospital for horses. So at least they're using the ground for a good cause, I guess. And then that house is now abandoned and run down, and it's very weird to see it in that condition. But all of these houses were part of My Lady's Manor, built by the third Lord Baltimore, Charles Calvert. None of that probably is important, but it's very cool in like Maryland history. So mid 1700s, which is about as old as it gets for a lot of Americans. So anyway, I became fascinated by this house that was called Walter's house, because everywhere the ghost on this property was called Walter, no matter who it was. They just affectionately referred to the spirits there as Walter, because one morning, some poor soul, some guy who was cleaning the restaurant at like 6 a.m., vacuuming or something, looked up, and this woman came through a doorway in a big billowing Victorian dress and walked up to him and said, "Where's Walter?" And he said, "I have no idea what you're talking about." And he was very confused and bewildered. And she said, I don't know if she said anything or if she nodded or whatever, and then turned and vanished into a wall. So, and then I think he, story goes, he quit that very day, right? So after that, they started calling all the ghosts Walter. So Walter's house was a place that my parents let me explore. It was safe to walk through some parts of the house. I explored it from top to bottom. You couldn't go in the basement because there were no basement stairs. So you could only look down into the basement from the hole that used to be the stairs. But all the way up to the attic. I just really fell in love with the house. I really, it was almost like a coming of age for me, being interested in ghosts, but not so much from like a paranormal investigation way that people are so focused on now, but more like I'm 11 years old and the world is this magical and mysterious place, and like what awaits me kind of. And so one day I was leaving with a friend, my little friend Graham from 6th grade. I got to look him up on Facebook one day. He came to explore the house with me, and my mom was there. We were pulling away from the house, and I had said before we left, I was like, gosh, I would do anything just to see the ghost one time, just to see Walter one time. And as we were leaving, I looked up into the attic windows. There were 2 attic windows. And there was a boy or young man leaning out of the windows with his hand on the windowsill, like this, like looking at the car. And he was completely white and had no face. So not like terrifying gaping black hole no face, but more like a doll or like a fencing mask where it was just like a smooth kind of just nothing there. But there was an expression. Like I felt this like swirling feeling, like this like static electricity in my stomach. It went all from head to toe. I could feel that he was surprised that we could see him and he was watching us. And everything, like I said, everything was white, but you could still see the texture of like hair, clothing, suspenders, just nothing there at the face. And, but curiosity and surprise. And we pulled past the house, and my mom was like, "What are you guys seeing? What are you guys seeing?" Because I asked Graham, I said, "What did you see?" before I told him, and he described the exact same thing. And she was like, "Should we go back?" And I remember being like, "No, don't go back, because if he's not there, it'll ruin the moment. If he's still there, I don't know what to do." Like, it was like this moment in time that was probably like 2 or 3 seconds, but it was like burned into my memory forever. And it was like the craziest thing I've ever seen, you know, really a ghost, you know, like holy effing F, really a ghost. And it was very special. And, I have had many interesting experiences since then, but nothing quite like that. And nothing where I felt this like deep connection with somebody that wasn't creepy either. Hold on, I have to plug in my computer.
Yep, that's all right.
No.
So as you're getting that, I just wanted to say that yeah, Gillian's really interested, engrossed, and she's wanting to read your books, especially Breakfast with Bigfoot. So I thought I'd put that
Oh yeah.
comment up as well. Yeah, so amazing story. I know, because we're going sort of backwards on your timeline, that you kind of got interested in this field from reading some of your mum's books, and you sort of say, so not all of them maybe you should have been reading at your age, but you enjoy them anyway. So you can mention some of those books that were highly influential to you.
Yeah. So when people talk about like, I don't have any children, and I don't know what kids are too young and not too young to read, because I'm like, I don't know, like I read all this stuff. As soon as I was old enough to read, I was like excited about ghost stories. And my mom, you know, they bought me the Scary Stories books by Alvin Schwartz and Stephen Gamble. And that like warped my vulnerable young mind, but they were the coolest things ever. And my mom was super into reading horror. So she always had a Stephen King book. She always had The Exorcist, and she always had Amityville Horror, which we were talking about earlier. She would cycle through them and then read them again. So it felt like every few months she was always reading these books again. One time she got the Exorcist. She always got them from the library too. So whenever she would get them from the library, there would always be something weird tucked into the book. And one time we used to read on her bed, and then I would fall asleep until my dad would come home from work, and then they'd put me in my bed. So I had a dream that she was reading her book, like lying in bed next to me, and that like a black, like demon, like a black little like monkey shaped kind of like demon with like a forked tail jumped out of the ceiling onto her chest. And in the exact moment that I had that dream, she jumped up and screamed, and I woke up. And I woke up to seeing her making the exact motion that she had made in the dream, throwing the book off of her. And she was doing this. And she was like, "Oh my God, you're not going to believe this." But like, she was just getting to this really scary part of the book. And when she turned the page, a 4-leaf clover fell out of the book onto her chest and like scared the living heck out of her. And of course, I'm sure somebody was like, "Oh, this is the scariest part of the book. Let me tuck something really weird into the book so that it'll get you." And but I remember as a kid being like, "You're not going to believe this, but I was just having a dream about you reading the book at that exact moment." And both of our minds were really blown by that. But yeah, always horror stories, always scary stories and scary movies and everything. I don't know. Like, I don't feel like it damaged me because plenty of other things damaged me. That was sort of the escape for me, was the reading about scary things, I guess. Probably a psychologist would say that that makes sense, but
So yeah, I mean, Anna said, yeah, I guess that's one. Is this where you get it from your mum? Charles says you had cool parents. I think as well, children love scary stories. They make scary stories up for each other, and I think children handle a lot more creepiness than parents kind of give credit for.
yeah.
Really.
I think we forget what it's like to be kids once we get to a certain age, or there's this desire to like shield kids from these topics. Now it has to be really difficult because the internet basically raises children. So no matter what you do to stop kids from seeing stuff, like, I would be more concerned about my child, listening to like Donald Trump going off on Fox News than I would be about them getting a hold of like a book with ghosts in it.
Yeah.
So it's like things kind of, it's just interesting now, like the things that parents probably go through, and how I can see how kids are more like, how being overexposed to intense topics and all the problems of the world is probably not good for children. I think we're seeing that happening live in front of our eyes.
Yeah.
But kids aren't stupid, and they know about things, and they want to know. And ghost stories are fascinating to kids. I think death becomes fascinating to young people a lot sooner. Like death and sex, I think, are something kids know a lot more about that we forget about as we get older, and are a lot more curious about. So I think that, I don't know, like being able to indulge in ghost stories was always exciting for me because I was interested in all of the dark corners of the world, and like all of the things that were out there that could possibly be, that were different than what I was experiencing in my own little life. And so ghost stories for me were a gateway to that.
Absolutely. And you've given Patricia an idea to hide things in library books.
I think that's a really cool idea. I would
Yeah.
appreciate that. If I think my mom, even though it scared her, she was like, that's cool. And she like put the, like, she put the 4-leaf clover right back in the book.
Yeah, so it could
Yeah.
scare somebody else as well. So
Yep. And
Stephen
she's
King,
like paying it forward. Yeah.
James Herbert, Dean Kuzan. Yeah, James Herbert I also really like as well, and Stephen King. So we're coming towards the end, so I get you to also mention your website and that again, but I also want to bring in that before the book launch at Cuddle Bunnies, you've also got, I think you're on the panel of, is it Haunted Homes? You've got an event coming up. I think it's called
Yeah.
Haunted Homes.
That's
So
the
you can say
one.
that, 'cause there's some
Yeah.
American people watching as well, so that'll be good.
That's the one coming up in Galena. It's going to be Haunted Homes, our otherworldly guests and neighbors. So it's a whole presentation dedicated somewhat to the things that we kind of talked about with regard to this house, and like the origins of fascination with ghost stories in that sort of romantic way. Like, people, if you grew up in a haunted house, like, and also why we're fascinated with haunted houses and why we're fascinated with ghosts, and like the different types of romantic relationships or fear relationships or curious relationships that we have with the ghosts around us. And it's an excuse to kind of like just talk about the cool haunted houses that I've been to. And I share some videos and some EVP and some other fun stuff from some of my different adventures. So I'm excited. I haven't given like a full length. I did a presentation in Savannah recently, but it was only a half hour. This is the first full presentation that I've given since the pandemic. So I have to like dust off the cobwebs and like make sure all of the links to all the videos work, and that I get back into like public speaking. But I'm really excited. That's going to be a fun weekend in Galena. And Galena is a cool place. Like, they have really cool wineries and shopping. So I'm also looking forward to doing some of that too.
Yeah, that sounds really good. Claire asks, Amelia, how do you manage your time? I heard you're quite old school. You like doing something on Word. Um, yeah, so how do you manage your time? Because I thought that was a great way of doing it, and think I might be adding into my schedule of things.
Like, so I love to-do lists, and I love checking things off. I will add something to my list just so I can check it off. But I work, I do work part-time. So I'm able to dedicate disciplined work time to projects as if it is a second job. I'm really lucky that I'm able to do that. Before, when I worked full time, I still dedicated at least an hour every day to projects, whether it was writing or whether it was responding to emails having to do with interviews or just, general like writing career kind of stuff. That was usually in the morning. So if somebody's a morning person or if somebody's a night owl, carving out that 1 to 2 hours for yourself every day or 4 days a week. Sometimes I suggest, if people get burnt out easily, to stay consistent and manage your time that way. I create my lists I have a planner that I actually write in, but then I have like to-do lists in Word, and I use Word to write all of my books too. And I just started using Google Drive. So I know I'm like catching up with the times, but not having too many to-do lists. Some people overburden themselves with like all these apps and things that are supposed to help you stay organized, but I don't find that works. I find that a one-pager here and there with different goals, like things I'm going to accomplish today, things I want to accomplish this month, things that are coming up, my long-term goals, separating everything out in boxes so that I can prioritize, and then trying to have, working on my vision, kind of like what am I doing with all of this? Like, what does it mean? Kind of just making sure I keep up with that. I don't know if that answers the question, but I have a routine. It's important to just establish a routine.
Absolutely. I like to-do lists, and actually I write on my to-do list because it's great to scratch something off straight away.
Yeah, right. I know, I live for it. I have lists that I keep every day. And it just, people say like, oh, you're so incredibly organized. But if I didn't do things the same way every day, I would forget to do them entirely. Like if I don't brush my teeth in the same order, like I have a morning routine and like brushing my teeth comes at a very specific place. If I shake that routine up, I'll forget to brush my teeth altogether. It's not something that I would think to do. It happens because it comes in line with the rest of my routine. So the to-do list keeps me in line, and there are things on the to-do list that probably people have no trouble remembering that I put on there because I do need to be reminded that at 3:00, or in this case, 4:00, I'm going to walk Oscar, who's pacing. Things like that just kind of keep me in line.
Brilliant. Do you want to give another mention to your website? You said you can get the books to your website or through Amazon, and also as well other places, other social media where people can follow you, and any other events you might have coming up which you want to give a mention to.
Sure. So ameliacotter.com. You can also find me on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, and YouTube, but mostly the stuff I share on YouTube is like things like this, where I'll go in and I'll put it into like my list of places where you can see me talk. But I do have some original videos and like storytelling videos on there. And so anyway, I'm on social. It's easy to find me, Amelia Cotter. If you want to email me, it's ameliamcotter@gmail. And ameliacotter.com has everything I've ever written, all of my appearances, where to get my books, all of that stuff. I've got Galena coming up next weekend. I guess technically it's in 2 weeks, but so not this weekend, but next weekend. I've got 2 book launches or 2 launch events happening for Apparitions in mid-May. then I'm having surgery, so I'm going to be out of commission for a little while, but I will have some other podcast appearances coming up then in like June. And then I'll be at the Dark History and Horror Con and probably the Milwaukee Paracon in coming up in the fall and summer. I'll start booking those appearances too.
Sounds absolutely amazing. We're 5 minutes towards 10 o'clock. Is there anything that, any stories, anything that I haven't asked you over this 90 minutes that you think would be a nice thing to finish on?
I will say we just moved into this apartment. It's really lovely. It's very cozy. We adore it. We have an awesome downtown city view. I don't know if I can show it to you guys because I don't know if it's like, if all you're going to see is, just brightness.
Oh, no, we're guessing a bit more.
Can you see it?
Really
okay.
cool. Yeah, we can see it now, which is really cool. Yeah.
Well,
yeah,
I don't
fantastic.
know how much you can make out, but you can see the Sears Tower and the Hancock Tower from here, which are like iconic Chicago places. I'm not sure if you can get the full view because I can see them just fine, but it's super sunny, so there's like a bit of a glare coming in on the skyline. But
I'm gonna have to Google it after.
But anyway, so I'm really excited about it. It's small. It doesn't seem like it's going to be haunted. But this painting flew off the wall the other day, very dramatically. After we had lived here for about a week, we've been here like 3 weeks, and so I was like, oh man! And when it flew off the wall, I almost died of a heart attack just because it made a loud sound, and we had to repaint the wall because it like scratched the wall. But I had that weird staticky feeling, and I was like, no, I'm not gonna just because I like ghosts doesn't mean I want to live with one. So that was creepy, and the feeling that I had when it happened was really creepy. Like something was like, thanks for the housewarming gift. So I'm hoping that it was just an act of poor drywall and not a sign of things to come.
Yeah, so hopefully not.
Hopefully not.
I'm sure you'll be okay. They'll be friendly ghosts.
As long as stuff's not flying off the walls, like we can hang. I'm open to a visitation that doesn't involve me needing to repaint a wall and move the bed and vacuum and everything.
I think you did say there are the nice spirits that don't always like to just jump out and say boo to people. That are actually fearful of interacting with us living as much as
right,
the other way around.
I imagine myself as a ghost that would sort of be like, hey, it's me, I don't want to scare you, like I just want you to know I'm here, or like, oh, I think you're pretty, or like, oh, I like that book you're reading, and sort of like how to manage, if you have control over that as a spirit, how to manage that and not absolutely scare the wits out of somebody.
Absolutely. Well, it's been an amazing night. Some thank you coming through. Thank you from Claire. Thank you from Patricia. Thank you from Annie. And thank you to everybody watching. And there's been a few silent watchers as well. So thank you to you as well. I will see about pulling your details, so it's definitely pinned as like at the top. There's also links to Amelia's website in the description of this video as well. So Charles says thank you as well. Thank you everybody for watching. Thank you very much, Amelia, for spending this. I say this evening, but it's your afternoon with exploring the afterlife. Yeah. And just want to say next Tuesday we have Carol Green, who's a psychic medium, who will be this time next week. So that would be good. Yeah, again, lots of thank yous now. Thank you, Amelia. Thank you, everyone. And I'm sure we'll be in touch at some point soon. Amelia.
All right. Sounds great. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.